This is LiR Media. To whom it concerns, welcome to the panel. Good evening, everybody, and welcome along to this edition of the panel on lirmedia.tv. Usual email info@lirmedia.tv for all your comments, and thanks to the people who took time to look at our show. It'll be up on our YouTube channel after the recording tonight or in the morning for your pleasure. And all the people who shared it, thank you as well. Press the red button on the right hand side to subscribe to our channel. It's free of charge. Now, tonight, welcome Sídhe Ó'Donnabháin to the programme.
Thank you.
And welcome Mary Honan.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome Dirk Klein.
Good evening.
Welcome John Lonergan.
Welcome. How are you?
And welcome John Wood from, is it Somerset?
No, Sussex.
Sussex.
He knew it began with an S.
Sussex. Now, we sent down a few ideas just to discuss, and since it's topical and all, I think that sometimes we do dress up for certain occasions without thinking about it, you know. I don't mean anything negative about that. Like Halloween, I couldn't be bothered with. It's only for the kids, you know, and I keep the lights off all night in the house, and I'll watch television with a blanket over my head so I won't be disturbed or something like that. Anyway, Halloween, I suppose it is a festival that's celebrated worldwide in different formats, but slightly. And I was just wondering for ourselves to have just a general gist of what it's like. Now, I think it's an old Celtic festival as far as I can tell myself, you know, Halloween. And did you give any thought to that, Dirk, about Halloween? When you were growing up in the Netherlands, did you have the usual trick and treat and all of that?
No, not really, because we didn't know anything about Halloween. We had something called St. Martin, which is about a week or so afterwards, and we would go, just not really trick or treat, but we say go to people's houses and then ask for sweets, and if they wouldn't do that, we beat them up. No, we didn't do that, but we just but not really trick or treating. But Halloween, it's only something new now in the Netherlands as well, but it's more like the American version, you know, what they see on TV, and then, you know, all the big hula baloo with dressing up and stuff like that. So it's not traditional as such, but we would dress up for other events, so like the carnival, for instance. That would be a 3-day event where we dress up and we would eat and drink as much as we could until we get to Lent, and then everything stops for 40 days. So that would be the main event, dressing up in the event in the Netherlands and other European countries as well, I suppose.
Now, Sídhe, there would be a spiritual connection, the Celtic connection going back in time to Halloween. I suppose the spiritual connection and the dual connection would be between where there's an understanding, as far as I can tell, I'm not an expert on this, of the emergence in Eve between the spiritual and the physical world.
Yeah. Well, in our tradition in Ireland, it's known as Samhain, as you know, and it's one of the most important times of the year, and it's marked always around that time, the 31st of October. It also coincides with, in Mexico, the Day of the Dead, or within the Catholic Church. Well, any Christian church, I suppose, the 1st of November is All Saints, and the next day is All Souls. So that whole time is all about the veil between the worlds being very thin, and we have the possibility of communicating with our ancestors, and the tradition of dressing up, I think it does partly actually come from Ireland, because people would have worn masks at that time and kept things outside the house, you know, lit up. I don't know if it was pumpkins, but I think it was turnips in Ireland. And
yeah, so, turnips. I remember the turnips, yeah.
Yeah. This is to keep away the evil spirits, because the veil between the worlds is so thin at that time that the possibility for bad spirits coming in is very strong as well.
And there was an uneasy acceptance, I suppose, in Ireland of Halloween, especially around accepting traditions that were Irish before Christianity. And
I don't think it was uneasy though. I think it was very natural to us and that never went away.
yeah, but I suppose it was always there. But you know, when Christianity came into Ireland, that was in our culture before Christianity, and then Christians tended to see anything before Christianity as a certain taboo. But they eventually embraced the culture. And Samhain, according to I'm just looking here now at Samhain marked the end of the harvest season and the beginning of the winter, or the darker half of the year, and that it was. It's really very strong, a strong Celtic religion. It's really strong in Ireland, and has a strong history in Ireland, and it goes back, I suppose, to our Celtic origins. And
it's also our new year. It's the Celtic year.
Yeah, that's right.
In tradition as well, you have Diwali, which is the celebration of the goddess Lakshmi, which is the new year in their tradition, and bringing in the light and everything. With the light, there's a festival of lights in India.
And John Wood, down there in Sussex now, will you be trick-or-treating yourself, or how do you think of these things over there?
Not me. Well, when the kids were growing up, they're all in their 20s and 30s now, but when they were little, they wanted to go and trick-or-treat and door to door and dress up and wear skeleton outfits and all that sort of thing. And they loved it. But nothing seems to happen. I mean, what's really interesting about Halloween is the difference in the cultures between Britain and America. So as I drive around here, there's only one house that has anything on it that's decorated for Halloween. But in America, they really go crazy.
Oh, they really go crazy.
Yeah, it's a big deal, isn't it?
Yeah,
they decorate their gardens with ghosts and cobwebs and coffins and everything. So it's so interesting why it's so big there and not really anything here.
Yeah,
I have colleagues now in Irish dancing, and they do their entire house up in Halloween in the same way as you do up a house in Christmas decorations, and they put you to shame. I would have nothing for Halloween. Absolutely nothing.
John, down there in Cork, you have a huge devil outside your front door, have you?
I have, yeah. I won't tell you who he is.
We can almost guess, a fellow Corkman.
Yeah.
Amen. Yeah. Amen. But John, I suppose it's just it's a huge commercial thing now. The whole meaning behind it and the whole history of it is lost. It's
If you're talking to me, that is.
John,
John Wood, yeah.
Okay. It's just a commercial thing. Yeah, and just fun for kids, really. I don't know whether it means anything anymore.
Well, I was reading a bit, the Roman Empire, of course. I was watching something about Julius Caesar during the week, but old sayings about crossing the Rubicon and all that, I want to know where that came from. I didn't realize there was a Rubicon River. I know we're getting off the point. But anyway, Julius Caesar, the Roman Empire themselves, they had a festival around that time which honored one of the goddesses. I know if you know about this, Pomona, Pomona, Pomona. She was the goddess of fruit and trees.
Oh,
And
when they're ripe, I suppose, when they're plucked.
Yeah, and the symbol of Pomona was the apple, hence the bobbing apples when you go in to try and get them.
Oh, yeah.
I suppose it's where they get the French word pomme from as well, then, as apple. P-O-M-E.
Yeah, apple, yeah.
I'll tell you what it means today. It's pumpkins, it's chocolates and things that are all commercialized to do with it, but also it's the time for horror movies to come out.
Yeah.
It's the traditional time to release a horror movie, isn't it?
I think it's a bit strange. It's a bit of a strange time as well, because with kids, every time we tell kids, don't take any sweets from strangers. Come Halloween, we tell, go out, get as much as you can. Doesn't matter who from who, just take everything.
But what I want to know is, do children prefer to actually get, as someone who hasn't children, do children prefer to get sweets, or do they prefer to get money at the door? Do people give trick money, Or do they take them at their word? Okay, I'll trick you and just give them nothing?
Good question. I mean, giving sweets, can you think about how dangerous that is? What could be in it? Poison, drugs?
They might be allergic to whatever is actually made up of in the sweet, and it's very difficult for a child. I think it must be difficult for a child who suffers from an extreme allergy
of
going around with other children who are trick-or-treating and feeling left out.
One way of controlling the population, leave them all eat nuts, and a lot of them would die and they're allergic to nuts or something like that.
What I would always do with my kids, I do quality control myself. I would eat them to make sure that they wouldn't be poisoned. Like, you know, it's what I do as a father. Like, you know, I mean, it's
self-sacrifice.
It's yeah. I mean, I should get a Nobel Prize for that, really.
But Dirk, you should get a Nobel Prize just for being you.
Exactly.
Dirk, can I ask you a second? Did you have Halloween in the Netherlands?
No, I just Pat asked me the same question earlier. No, we didn't. It's something called same.
Did Pat ask you?
Yeah. But that doesn't matter. We know you do this all the time, Mary. That's fine. Don't worry about that. So it just ignore me. I'm in between you anyhow. But no. But the short answer is no.
It just tells you, Dirk. I don't half listen to you.
John Lonergan, would it be nice to go around to certain doors now and put in a few firecrackers into them around Cork where you live? Because I have an idea where you live.
Yeah, it would be brilliant actually. But, I think the whole I remember when Halloween, when we were growing up, it was all about the apples, the snap apple, the apple in the water, dunking your head into it, and the fun and games, and blindfolding you and crawling along the floor to try and find whatever the parents would have put down on the ground. You know, all that seems to be gone, and it's all knocking at the doors now, looking for sweets and looking for this and looking for that. And if you don't answer the door, they'll egg your house. And it's you know, it's I don't know whether you have that up there, but my God, the egging.
No, we're very civilized in Limerick, John. We're not at all like Cork.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about Limerick, Mary.
Well, Pat and you were from Cork.
Now we leave Halloween there, but I suppose you always look back and miss the things that are no longer applicable around Halloween. It was a different time, certainly in the late 50s, 60s, going up, totally different time than what it is now. But there is a commercial element into everything now, including Christmas, where the actual solemnity and the spiritual side of it was totally forgotten. It's all about money. But there you go. The panel is a program here on LiRmedia.tv, and you can send us an email at info@lirmedia.tv. Now, the second little topic we got onto tonight is, are there certain topics and ideas and stuff that are taboo in the general media discussion and the discussion programs? This is not confined to any particular country. In the general media, we tune into the general news media discussion programs on radio and television, primarily, that are no longer allowed to be discussed. I'm talking about the controversy during the week when John Wood over there in LBC, when the DJ in the morning show, he's a huge audience, when he said, he referred to, what's his name, the cook, the chef,
Gordon Ramsay.
His daughter, he referred to her as, the chubby little thing on Strictly Come Dancing. Now, it caused a furore. I'm not saying I agree with him or not, honestly. I'm neutral on it. But I mean, when you consider what his father said on live television to many people and belittled them on live television, his father, Gordon Ramsay, my God Almighty, what the DJ said about the chubby little thing. What did you think, Shifra, of that when he was? Did you hear about that during the week?
No, I didn't follow. I don't actually follow a lot of mainstream news anymore. I find it very distressing, actually. It is. A very bad mood. So I didn't hear about that. Sorry.
But even referring to people, like they don't call people fat anymore now because they find that it's an insulting term. They're trying to, what's the word? Make it a medical term.
Well, can I just say, Pat?
as if it's not a problem anymore now. Once you're obese now, you're in this little box. You don't have to do anything with your life because you have like an admiration for being obese, which I think is frightening. What do you think, Sheila, that premise?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, once you have a label and you peg it on that, you're no longer really responsible for yourself or your health or anything like that. It's like you get diagnosed with bipolar or something like that. It's like, well, I can't really live my life because I have this condition or this.
That's what I mean, yeah.
Whatever, but the perceptions of fatness has changed through the centuries. It's very interesting if you look at, if you go back to earlier sort of 17th century, 18th century art, women were more voluptuous and everything like that in the image. Was now you have to be like a stick insect to get down a catwalk, that kind of thing. That's very negative and very destructive for young people, young women, especially. But interesting that I spent a lot of time in India with Tibetan people, and they would always compliment you if you put on weight. So it's lovely to see you're doing well, you're prosperous,
Right.
put on a bit of weight or whatever. Whereas here it's the opposite. You know what I mean? Like there's a very negative perception of fatness, so it can be very destructive, especially for young women.
Yeah. And John Wood, did you hear about that controversy over there in Britain about his comments?
I heard about it, but I'm a bit confused actually as to who said what. And the weird thing is, I worked with Gordon Ramsay once. In the late, just came out of university, and he was working at the Mayfair Hotel, and so was I. And then a few years later, I saw him on television. I thought, hang on a minute, I recognize that guy. Now he's super famous. Isn't that crazy? But I don't know. So who? Can you just help me? Who said that he's? It was a DJ that said his daughter was chubby.
He's on the LBC. He does the breakfast program on London
Broadcasting.
I know it. Yeah.
Operation.
He described her as the chubby little thing.
What did Gordon say in response?
Gordon.
I'd say he's afraid to come outside of LBC studios.
Dirk, did you hear about that?
Wow.
To be honest, no. I couldn't care about that either. But I think all this kind of discussion seems to be a bit more going around in the English-speaking world than the rest of the world, really, because something like that no one in Germany, and Netherlands, and France would actually care about that. Really, it wouldn't be even on the news. It would be just. I think this. For years, I thought that the Netherlands was quite a politically correct country until I moved here. I changed my mind on my own country that stage. So it's just, and it's funny that Shifa said about labeling. There seems to be some kind of desire nowadays that everyone needs to be labeled. I mean, we always talk about racism and discrimination. No, the only way of getting rid of racism and discrimination is getting rid of labels. Stop labeling people. But for some reason, it has become more of a desire. We have to label everyone, put everyone in the corner, and everyone has to have this label. Well, you're that, you're this, you're what, whatever. I mean, I don't even know what I am anymore. I mean, I think I'm a Dutchman, but I'm not 100% sure with the labels nowadays. Like I could be a Western European male or whatever.
I think. Sorry, there.
Okay.
I think, Pat, your initial statement is like it's media driven, and this is what the problem is. The media are deciding what is being put out, or should I say, the people running all these, which are the governments really, are deciding what's being put out. And this is why everything is labeled, as Dirk was saying. And, it's to me, we don't have free speech anymore, because again, you go to say something, in a conversation, and suddenly somebody's picking you up in it, and it's, oh, you shouldn't have said that. And why shouldn't I say this? Because it was said on television last week that, it seems to be that's what's leading. Whereas years ago, we all had conversations, we called each other's names. I mean, the old saying in Ireland, sticks and stones will break your bones, but names will never hurt you. All that seems to be gone out the window. things about here just slightly offline. I mean, there was a people living not far from me, and they're from they came in from Iran, I think, and they complained to the school that the school is called the School of the Ascension, and there's a Blessed Mary statue, and they wanted the statue taken down or covered so that their children wouldn't have to pass it going in the morning.
Well, that's a bit silly now. And Mary Honan, what we're talking about is.
I didn't hear it.
That was accepted not so long ago. Now, are we raising a generation, this generation coming up behind us?
Can I just say, I didn't hear that comment that he made, but I think
I listened back to it.
Yeah, but I think I'm trying to think of the actor. He was in The Shawshank Redemption.
Morgan
Freeman. And Morgan Freeman had it absolutely right in relation to racism when he said, you know how you get rid of racism? Stop talking about it. Stop trying to divide us out. Stop trying to pigeonhole us. You're black, I'm white, you're tall, I'm small, you're fat. You know, just treat people, if you want to treat somebody the same, don't start telling them what they are. And I say, having said that, I listened to you, what you said about Tilly Ramsey. A sweeter girl you wouldn't come across. She couldn't be any more different than Gordon, her dad. She is just a shy, insecure young girl who decided to go into a competition. It probably, knowing the type of person she is from seeing her, it probably took one hell of a job for her to go on it. And the last thing a young girl at 18 wants to hear is themselves being described by their appearance as a chubby little thing. And I know at 18 years of age, I was well into anorexia and spent 12 weeks in hospital one time with it. And I didn't have people telling me I was fat. I was just, you're caught up in a world. I wasn't. I was 6 stone, less probably at that stage. And it's your own view of yourself. And when you have society telling you that you have to be in America a size 0 to get a job, if you're a size 1 or a size 2, you're too big, no matter how tall you are. And when you see people, when you're in the arts, involved in the arts, you are hyper conscious of yourself. And Tilly Ramsey now has gone into that. She has stepped over into the arts. She's an academic, she's doing her degree. The misfortunate girl decided to enter a competition. She is her daughter's child, her father's child. And because of that, people feel that they can say what they like about her and make a personal attack on her. And I just think that it should go back to that phrase, if you want people to feel good about themselves, stop talking about all the things that you see negative in them. And, calling her a chubby little thing wasn't being meant as a kind or a compliment. If it was, he would have said she's doing very well and not make a comment about her personal appearance.
We won't
in my view.
Personalities of it, but the principle, I suppose, that we were talking about earlier on, and a few we touched on it, was that the earth is one country, and mankind is its citizens. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white or green or blue or whatever color you are. But I suppose we're looking at, she rightly said, in India and other cultures you'll be moving through, we're looking at this through a very narrow prism of white-owned media, for the want of a better description. There I am again now falling into the trap, but that's the way I describe it myself, And I don't know, there's an awful lot of subjects and matters that are not discussed properly, and I feel myself that the generation behind us are not as equipped as we were to deal with all the traumas and stuff that's coming down the line for them. I don't know myself. Are they fully equipped? Aware? Have they? I don't know, John Wood, what do you think of that?
Well, you'd have thought that people would be more able to talk about more things today than the old days. But you're suggesting it's the other way around,
Yeah.
which is really interesting. And sorry, the other person, I've forgotten his name. Dirk, no, the other Irish, but in Cork, the person in Cork.
John.
The other John. That's right,
The other John.
It's a very good point about, you know, in the old days, you didn't have to be so guarded. You just say what you like. No one really got offended. But now you've got to watch every word you say in case you upset somebody or something. And it's similar to the, you know, it leads on to the statues all being pulled down. You know, people finding offense about everything.
Yeah.
Not just what you're saying, but what's been built in reference to some historical event. So there
are two big issues at the moment, I think. First of all, and this is something I said years ago, about parents not being able to say no to kids anymore. I mean, everything has to be yes and no is, and we're at the point now where some kids don't have any resilience because they were never suddenly. Yeah. All the lives were said yes, then suddenly they get no and they crumble. Whoop, gone. The second issue, which is very close to my heart, is distortion of history. It keeps happening. And John Wood mentioned there the bringing down of statues and whatever, taking books away, like the Little House on the Prairie, seen as racist. No one puts anything in context anymore. It's just, well, this. Yeah. They look at the spectrum of what today, of October 23rd, 2021. This is what's acceptable today. No one puts anything in context anymore. And to me, as you know, I'm into history, and back in the 1920s, you had something called the Weimar culture, not
Republic,
not Republic, the culture. There's a difference. In the cultures is a small bit like we have now, distortion of history, yet everything was possible, and on the other side, nothing was possible. We're kind of in the same situation now, and my fear is that we're getting to a point where we're getting a repeat of 1940s, 50s, 1940s. We're not too far away from it, but with the exception, this time it's going to be more on a bigger global scale. So,
yeah, I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you, Dirk, and the importance of history and the importance of learning context of every statue, why it's there, who put it there, what we can learn from the statue now that it is there, rather than tearing it down, because you're still not going to change history. That happened, that was put there. Why was it put there? What were people thinking? Why were people educated to think in the way that they thought? But when it comes to a personal attack on a young girl of 18 who can't help who her father is, and people think, oh, well, you know, Gordon Ramsay dishes it out, so we can dish it out to his daughter who's only 18 and isn't a dancer and isn't an entertainer and is just doing something that she loves doing now. And she's doing a bloody good job. And they could talk about her as little Tilly Ramsay, or they could talk about her as young Tilly Ramsay. But why they have to bring in her weight just doesn't add anything to the conversation.
Mary,
and it doesn't, you know.
Mary, just picking up on what you said there, no? Right? You just said, why don't I call her little Tilly?
Yeah,
again, but somebody will pick up on that and say, that's incorrect.
But I'm 4'10", John, so I don't, you know, I mean, I'm deprived in every way.
I know.
God was very cruel when he made me
Mary, but
small.
This is what we're saying. Everything is politically incorrect or correct. And going back to what Dirk said there regarding the kids and not being able to say no, we can't say no to them, or the parents can't say no to them. A lot of it is down to, as well, is phones, conversation. Pat, you said it at the start there, you know. The children don't know, right? They don't know because their heads are in the phones, their heads are in music, and they're in, I mean, it's crazy. You walk into town, I drive into town there earlier, and there must have been 20 or 30 people walking on the street, and every one of them had their head down looking at the phones. the art of conversation is gone. They don't know how to hold a conversation.
That's true. That is very true.
And you look at their spelling. I mean,
Spelling.
their spellings like are all predictive text stuff, you know. If you ask any of them to write a letter, they spell it. They spell the words the way they spell it when they're on their phones. And you should try that with kids or anything. If you have anybody that's around, ask them to write down a sentence.
Before instead of before.
Yeah.
I go before.
And that's what I find is wrong. That the act of conversation is gone, and it's all again. Ask them. I'd love you to do it now with anyone you know. Ask any teenager or anything to write down a 2 or 3 sentence letter. And I guarantee
Dirk and Pat.
I have to say I'm blessed because my kids they love to read books, and they trust me, they know how to write a letter.
Right. But you know what I'm saying, Dirk.
I know what you're saying. But I have to be honest. It's not only kids though. I've seen grown men or old people as well on the phone, and even this morning somebody banged into me, and I think she was in the 60s or 70s, just looking at the phone, like, you know what I mean.
Dirk, do you think that your children learning to speak and to write English, do you think that emphasis on the importance of good writing and good spelling came from the fact that you speak 4 or 5 languages and that English wasn't your first language, but you speak it, and your understanding of the nuance of the English language is extraordinary? I mean, your understanding of the sense of humor that the Irish have. You have an Irish sense of humor in a lot of, you haven't just picked up the language, you've picked up the nuances. And do you think that the fact that you have had to learn a second language has instilled in your children the importance of learning the English language properly?
No, I'll tell you what the secret is, Mary. It's quite simple. What I did, I took the time every night when they were babies. I would go up to the room and would read a story to them. Sometimes only about 3 or 4 pages, but I got them interested in books. Nothing to do with languages, just because I took the time and read a story for them. And sometimes I put in characters as well, made it a bit funny, threw in a bit of a few funny words as well, and that's how they got into reading. I mean, that's it. People, but to me, I mean, there's people that are working 12-hour shifts sometimes. But even when I was working down in Cork, I was gone for 12, 14 hours sometimes. I would still make that 20 minutes time to go up to my kids' room and first of all read a story to them, and then sing them a lullaby before they went to bed. And I would change the lullaby as well, and make sure there was lots of words in those lullabies, so they would pick up on that. So nothing to be known all language. This is just the fact that I took those 10 minutes.
Having 3 of my kids gone through Sídhe, the secondary school system, and I'm not an expert. I'm not an educationalist. I'm an observer of it, all right, and a frustrated observer of it for a long, long time. I know about you, John Wood, over in England, but our, in my opinion, our secondary school cycle up to Leaving Cert is almost useless.
No, it's not. It's not almost useless, Pat. It's completely useless.
Yeah.
Well, Sídhe is a teacher of English.
What do you think, Sídhe, of that? Because equipping and providing young adults for life when they emerge from that cycle at 17, 18, what do you think of it yourself?
Well, I suppose I went through it all, and I went to college, and then I many years later, did an MA. But I didn't question it myself when I was going through it.
Yes.
But when I went to train as a secondary school teacher about 5-6 years ago, I hated almost every minute of it. I couldn't stand it. I taught, actually, my training was in the school that I went to.
Yeah.
And anything that bordered on creative or that went into the creative zone, the children were hesitant about. Oh, what does this have to do with our junior cert? What does this have to do with our Leaving Cert? I did all sorts of projects, folklore projects, all sorts of different things with them, and tried to bring the creative in, which is what I do anyway with creative writing workshops. I just went straight back to doing that. I just said, I'm not doing that. I don't want to prepare kids for state exams. But then I saw my son going into secondary school, very excited in first year as they can be, with the uniform and the, it's like going to Hogwarts or whatever, nice school and everything. And then with all the lockdowns, it was destroyed, really. He completely demotivated him, made him depressed, cut him off from everybody. The lockdowns are so destructive for children and for everybody, really. But so now he's in this democratic Sudbury school, which is a very different kind of approach, self-directed learning. He's a lot happier, but I do have concerns about literacy and numeracy like everybody else, but he's actually slowly getting back into reading in his own way now.
Yeah.
But I think
Is he
for
happier?
him, much happier, yeah. And he's focusing a lot on music, and he's focusing a lot on art and a little bit on history. They direct their own learning though, so it'll be very interesting to see what happens. I've seen kids thrive in that school, so that's why I decided that was the way to go. He was utterly miserable, 4 months out of school this year, and then we were waiting for April 12th, and the poor first years and second years were allowed to go back to school, and he came back and he said, I hate it, I want to be homeschooled. I was like, oh God, that'd be a challenge. So we just found Sudbury was down the road, so we went with that.
But if you have to look, if you just have to look at one subject in Irish schools, it's Irish, okay?
Yeah.
It's taught sometimes in pre-primary school, primary school, secondary school. The second they leave the education system in school, no one is able to speak it anymore. Or
Yeah, but that's the problem
within a few weeks.
Yeah, but that's a huge thing in our country. The fact that we just abandoned that, you can't blame the British, you can't blame everybody.
No.
It's very easy to install and implement a bilingual country. Israel did it, Finland did it.
I agree 100%, Shifra. I'm always saying, as somebody who went through the whole primary and secondary level with no idea of how to speak in Irish. My mother was fluent.
Speaking Irish.
It should be from day one to the end of your career, to the end of your schooling. It should be all Irish.
Yeah,
John
those skills
Wood.
are brilliant, Yeah.
Yes.
I'll go over there to John Wood. To you put your family through. I don't mean you put them through hell. I mean you put them through the cycle that we're talking about. Secondary school, which is up to the age of 6, before university. How did you find it? How did they find it? How did you find it as a parent, that system? How well did they come out of it,
Well, actually went to a private school. So it's all different. The whole system is completely different. I myself went to a private school, which was called a public school, which is very confusing. I don't know why we call private schools public schools over here, but we do. So that it's a whole different system. So I don't really know the other how it works elsewhere, to be honest.
And how did you find it yourself?
Oh, well, I had a fantastic education. You may not be able to see that, but I did. No, I did O levels, now called GCSEs, and A levels, and I went to university. Really lucky, great education. And my kids, they chose not to do that route. They just wanted to leave school and start working. But that was my decision. I came from the generation where you feel that you had to get a degree because it would guarantee you a career, which isn't the case at all, really. It's what everybody thought at the time. So that's why I went to university.
Yeah, but that's what the problem is now as well, that people are still pushing to degree, but now we don't have the truck drivers, we don't have the plumbers, we don't have the builders, because everyone is having degrees and behind the tail in Lidl. I mean, that's where it goes wrong here in Ireland with education. There's no diversity. People are taught they're not taught, it's only the whole education system is based on one exam, it's the leaving cert. If you just feel a bit bad on that day, that's it. With other countries, it's a bit more nuanced. Like in the Netherlands, for instance, the teachers look at talent as well, and what kind of. For instance, I was schooling languages, so they kind of push me more into the language corners. There were people who were kind of great in maths and who kind of pushed in that corner. I liked history as well. It's kind of bespoke in a way, and that's because I didn't even like school there. So but I would have completely hated it here. I think I would have probably taught myself if I had to do secondary school here. But Mary,
you've seen it from both sides.
Yeah.
You've seen it from going to school, obviously, you went through the system of leaving cert and all of that and working, then you went back and did your degree and PhD, and then you had a lecturing job in local Mary Immaculate College, which is part of UL, and you went to lecture what we call our new, shiny new teachers coming into the system. How did you find that experience?
Well, I was all so excited going in, but like you know, I mean, I went back as a mature student to resit my leaving cert, and then I did the degree, the masters, 2 masters and a PhD, all as a mature student. And when you go back, I think as a mature student, you have a completely different mindset. You want to study. You're not there because you feel you have to go to school because that's what children have to do. And then because you go to college because you want to learn and you know what you want to get out of it, rather than being a student who's feeling that they're going to college, one, as a rite of passage, and two, to maybe to get away from the village that they were in or the place they were in and live away from home for a while in their first time out. But working, I loved Mary Immaculate College because I loved I suppose I loved the smallness, the size of it, the homeliness of it, the feeling of family that was created there. Having said that, when you're lecturing to children, like Schiffer said, and you're a creative person, my first degree was in art and design. So you're trying to bring in your creativity into a classroom, and you're teaching world religions through creativity, and how teachers are going to be creative and take a creative approach to teaching in a primary school other children about, say, Islam or Judaism or whatever. You have children looking at you and thinking, like Schiffer said, what's this got to do with religion, or what's this got to do with Judaism or Christianity or Islam, or how do and it takes them a while to actually realize, because as children we are all creative beings. We are the most creative as once you start speaking, we are creative beings. We lose that some way along the line, and we become ashamed or shy of being creative. And somehow or other, you're forced back into your childhood state and realizing that you've got to try and introduce something as serious as Islam or Christianity or Judaism to a child through a creative way. And that way it helps them to understand it a little bit more. But as Schiffer said, it's a difficult process because some children don't think that they're creative, and they don't realize that they are. They just forgot how to be.
Yeah.
And
what about that beautiful cat? What's his name or her name?
Oh, this is Yuki.
Yuki.
Yes.
Yuki.
Yes.
Yeah.
How many have you?
2, but the other one is pregnant, so we're going to have kitties.
Are you going to keep them all?
The panel is a show on LiRmedia.tv, and our email is info@LiRmedia.tv. And we're going on to a subject that, well, is the death penalty a necessary measure in society today as it termed? And before we get into the meat of the subject, the death penalty is on the statute books of the following countries. There's not many of them, according to my own little looking around. There's Bangladesh, China, Egypt, Ethiopia, India, Indonesia, Iran, Japan, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, Sri Lanka, Taiwan, and the good old USA.
And North Korea.
Yeah,
Really?
when I sit around the statute books, we're looking at, but I know
Countries that have a statute book.
there are other countries I know that has the death penalty. I just concentrate on you can look up the law, do you understand me, and the offense. But I get what the point you're making. There's a few countries like that wouldn't necessarily have, I shouldn't be laughing, a written law, but it prompted me about this chap who's on trial in the United States for killing those 17 people. You know, those 14 students and 3 members staff in that school 2 years ago, 3 years ago in the United States. Remember that? Was it in Portland? I think, not too sure. Portland killing. He's 24 years of age. Surely, if there's any candidate ready for the death penalty, surely that person deserves it after indiscriminately killing 17 people. John Wood, what do you think yourself? Do you think it's a necessary deterrent in society?
Well, firstly, a lot of those killings, you often find that the murderer, the chap with the gun, was on antidepressants. And one of the side effects of antidepressants is violent behavior.
Amazing.
And it triggers some people, and it would be really unfair to basically for the state to murder them, when really it was a result of the drug companies, who reluctantly had to put all these side effects on their bottles. Oftentimes they're forced to say suicide and so on is an actual side effect, but that's another whole topic.
Yeah.
But just generally, I just feel I know it's a deterrent. Think, oh, I might get the death penalty, so it might put people off being criminal and doing antisocial things. But I feel it's medieval and it's barbaric, and it's not a humane society or caring society that murders. I mean, it's hypocrisy, isn't it? I mean, you're murdering them.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
how do you really justify it? So that's my take on it.
Shifa, what do you think? Do you think it should be on statute books? Because I'll give you the example, the recent trial I'm looking at, surely be to goodness, if anybody deserved the death penalty, that chap does, for killing 17 people.
Well, yeah, it's very interesting what John says about that a lot of them are on antidepressants to do those random shootings, which are so utterly shocking to us. I suppose there's another problem in America is that it's so easy to get access to guns as well. And what kind of, they've obviously very, very alienated from community. Perhaps we don't know what kind of parenting they've had. I haven't looked into anybody, anybody's profile who that happened to. But the question about the death penalty, like, think about, of course, I always think of Kevin Barry being hanged, and there were 9 youngish or mostly young men, during that, war. And of course, they were court-martialed, and the context was a war. But that didn't deter anybody, and we got independence anyway. I think the last use of the guillotine was the guy, the guillotiner was called Chevalier, and that last one was in France very late, sometime in the early 70s, I think. Yeah. So you had that then. I think it certainly would be a deterrent for people. I recently have a friend who has an Afghan tenant, and he was telling us about, he had to get out to Iran very young, had to leave his family behind in Afghanistan. But he was telling us how there was the death penalty. He said he did not know the term gay when he went west. He had no idea. He was living in Norway, and his manager fancied him and kept asking him to have a coffee. He said he was just very friendly. He didn't understand what was going on. People were saying, no, I don't think you quite understand. He likes you. Yeah, I know he likes me. He's my friend. Well, it's a bit more than that. He didn't understand, because in Iran, they would kill the person. They would hang them if it was any implication that they were gay. So that certainly created some kind of deterrent, but of course it was going on anyway. I think it's still illegal in India, but the death penalty would certainly be a deterrent, wouldn't it? But
Dirk?
Yeah. Actually, I don't think that actually is the deterrent. If you look at the numbers in the US, for instance, first of all, the death penalty is irreversible. If you make a mistake, you can't bring it back.
Absolutely.
And from 1978 till today, 183 people received the death penalty in the US, and found out were innocent. So those 183 people can never come back.
Yeah.
On top of that, until 2015, the levels of crime they peaked in 1980, and they stayed high until 2015. Then they came down again a small bit. So as deterrent, that didn't work either. if you look at Florida, there's 30 people were killed there, innocent people were killed. And in the last year alone, 3 people were put on death penalty. The last year alone in Florida, just one state. Just think of that. Three people were put on received the death penalty. So I mean, clearly that's not a deterrent, because if it was, they wouldn't. To me, deterrent if death penalty once, twice, and then people will stop doing things, but they don't. It keeps going. And Schiefer makes a good point as well. A lot of these counties where the death penalty are still there, you can get killed for anything. In Saudi Arabia, they throw people off roofs because they either whatever they're gay, or
Russia kills people because they're gay.
Yeah, so it's not. It's. I can see the point where you said he killed 17 young people. I can see the point where the emotions come in. People say, "Yeah, hang the bastard." I can see that, and I'm thinking, to be fair, if one of my kids were one of those 17, I would think the same thing, but I probably would have killed him myself before there was a court case. But that's it. If you look at Ireland, the Irish history, look at Birmingham, 6 killed for 4. If they received death penalty as well, and basically, and imagine if that didn't come out that they were innocent, they would have been dead by now as well. I mean, and even the last execution in the UK and England was a poor boy who was actually kind of, they call him nowadays learning disability. He had said to his friend, "Let him have it." They killed a cop, but what he actually meant is let him have the gun, not let him have a.
That was
actually, that boy with the learning disability, he got the death penalty. The guy who actually shot didn't. So I mean, yeah, I can see why people might say.
John Lonergan, if you were the Minister for Justice to bring back the death penalty in Ireland, do you think?
I know who he died.
Yeah, you've read my mind.
I'm psychic, John.
You can guess exactly who I'd want to be put down straight away. I personally like picking up on what Dirk said there. How many people were innocently convicted in the wrong in America? But also you must remember that the 17 people that were murdered were innocent as well. Yeah. You know, like there's both sides of every argument.
They were in school.
You know, I mean, that's what you have to look. It's all right. I've read those stories about guys that were were killed and in prison and everything because they were convicted, and they were convicted in the wrong because somebody else was corrupt in either the police department or higher up. And, you know, but people forget about the innocent 17 children that were people that were killed by that guy and all the other murders as well. So really, does the death penalty stop all this from happening? I mean, Schiefer said it there, it's the guns. And when I hear in this country that people want the Gardaí here in this country to have guns, oh my God, we will go down that road, the wrong road, if ever that happens, because at the end of the day, a Garda is only a human being, the same as all of us.
I don't agree with that.
He goes home with grievances as it is. So imagine what will happen. I just think that it's crazy. Yeah,
I don't. Sorry to interrupt, but I don't agree with that because I come from a country where all cops have a gun, and there's no mass shootings there. Well, there have been a few, but I mean.
Yeah, it's not. But that's your country having that for years. We're bringing it in. We're bringing it in.
No, I mean, the problem is
Gardaí, you know, but they're only ordinary guys.
No, I know that, but the problem in Ireland is it's nothing to do with guns or not with Gardaí. The Gardaí don't have a power. Yeah. Let me finish this. I've had a couple of chats with Gardaí around our area about, for instance, antisocial behavior. And I told a guard once, because he said, well, we found the youngsters, they were drinking and they had drinks with them. And as soon as we take the bottles away from them, their mothers come down and say, "Oh, this is my drink. He was already carrying it for me." And I said, "Well, you see, what you do wrong there is you don't ask them for the bottles. What you ask them, turn the bottles around and empty them, so they can't drink then. So they have to be a bit more creative here as well." But the guards, they don't have the powers here. And even when I see some guards here, I mean, it's coming down back to size as well. Like, you know,
Well,
I've seen guards. If I go crazy, if I decide to go crazy in town, there's no way in hell they will have to be able to stop me.
No, that's not true, Mary. Or would
Well,
you be, as we were saying there, Mary? It's not guns that kill people. It's people with guns
that kill people. But the thing about it is, firstly, like John, I definitely do not agree with Gardaí having guns. I do get what Dirk is saying, all right, but I just think that when you haven't got a gun, I think all guns should be banned personally. When you don't have a gun, the death penalty, I am absolutely, and you know my stance on the death penalty. If people believe in the right to life and the right to life of the unborn, they certainly should believe in the right to everybody's life being precious. And as John Wood said, and it's quite correct, if somebody kills 14 people, you're compounding that, and you're becoming a judge and executioner when you say that it's wrong for him to commit a murder, but it's okay for me to decide to murder him. Now, that you become, no matter how much you try to cleanse your hands of it, you become a murderer. I'm thinking back, and Dirk is right. I mean, there have been far too many innocent people executed in the United States, and one of them in particular always struck with me, and that was the little guy, George, who was only 14 years old. The police knew he was innocent. They knew he wasn't even in the city at the time, and he was executed. He was strapped to an electric chair and killed. And when you look at James Hanratty, one of the last people to be executed in England, I mean, the man was not mentally competent. Nowadays he probably would have been seen as having a disability, and it's believed the last thing he said before the policeman was shot was, "Give it to him," meaning give the gun to him. And the other guy that was with him shot him. Now, James Hanratty is buried right beside my grandmother in London. And, you know, I've always been vehemently against the death penalty, because once you go down that route, you become no better than the person that has committed the murder.
There is a different way of dealing with people like who killed 70 people. What you do, you put them in a small little cell for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Give them a bit of bread every morning, and
penal servitude.
Let me be the devil's advocate about the person who killed the 17 people. The first thing that happens when something happens like that is the excuse is made for the person who perpetrated the crime. That's the first thing that's happened. No cost to the 17 people that are dead. And then the second crime on humanity in general is that person will be paid for the rest of his life in prison by you and me and all the taxpayers around him, to sit in prison no matter what condition they are, and they're allowed to live.
But it's not the police, or it's not the justice. Execution is not. Execution, Pat, is not. It's not justice. It's retribution, and it's retribution doled out by people who are in no position to take somebody else's life, because they're neither the victim nor the perpetrator. They have nothing to do with it. They're playing God. And as bad as one crime is, another crime doesn't absolve it.
And as I said earlier, it's irreversible. If you find out,
it's irreversible.
If you find out you make a mistake.
17 people are dead. And you know something, when I was looking at this thing, you should read up yourself. Do you know how many people are affected by that 17 people directly?
Hundreds.
Are almost 300 people.
Yeah, hundreds. But that's not saying that you and I on a jury get to decide that he dies.
I'm saying there are cases where there is no other justice for those people except the death penalty. Now, I'm not in favor of it, or I'm not against it. I will
But if I just say, like, for instance, the Birmingham 6 or Guildford 4, people were convinced they did it.
Yeah.
People were convinced they did it.
They were not. They were not.
No.
But, what about the Holocaust?
Exactly. Look about that. But look at Schaeffer's granduncle, Kevin Barry. Kevin Barry was executed at 18 years of age. A life that went unlived.
Hang on a second. What John Wood said there about the Holocaust. I loved, and I'm not a voyeur, I loved watching the films of the Nazis being hanged, because there's film footage in black and white. Yeah. I thought that was just fantastic, and it should be shown in all our schools. To me, that's one thing that should be shown.
Look, that's you know.
But you can't compare. Sorry, you can't compare the Holocaust with an ordinary crime.
You can't compare genocide, Pat.
Chap killing 7.
And that's the only case where I would say yes to death penalty.
Well, that may be a very visually impactful image. And it may have happened to some of them, but most of them got off quite scot-free.
Scot-free.
Because the legal system didn't.
I'm actually doing a piece.
Prove at the time, they couldn't prove the legal system they had. They couldn't prove that they were guilty.
No. There's nothing.
Even.
Sorry, Schiffer. There's nothing to do with they couldn't prove. They could prove because the Germans had everything documented. They could prove
everything.
What happened? The Russians, the Americans, the Brits, they needed them. I'm actually doing a piece at the moment on a NASA scientist. And he was involved. He was involved in killings himself, but he got a nice little job with that.
They were well connected. They were well connected in this country. They got in here.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, I know. But I did see one documentary about one particular older man who was he was 90 and he was being put on trial, and that's what they were saying, in this documentary, that the legal system simply couldn't prove that they were directly responsible, which obviously is bullshit. But are you talking about Operation Paperclip there, the CIA?
Oh, but yeah, but you're talking about Demjanjuk there.
Yeah.
I assume.
And we also talk about Nazis in here as well.
But you're talking about the Holocaust. I don't have to remind. We don't want to get into a big thing about the Holocaust. But look at Angela Merkel, who's getting all the praise and laudits, and I suppose she was a good politician. How many times did she go to Auschwitz as Chancellor of Germany? Ask her that. And why didn't she? Anyway, that's, you know what I mean? There's a huge residue of still this trying to forget about this appalling thing.
But it goes back, Pat, to what you said at the very start about statues and everything we were talking about. If you deny the past, and you try to water it down, and you try to remove yourself from it in the hope that it will go away, it's going to catch up with you one way or another. It's not going to go away. It happened, and it will happen again if things aren't learned by it. But with regards to the death penalty, none of us, and I would hate to be on a jury that would be deciding whether someone lived or died, because I don't have that right. I'm not God.
I thought the Roman thing was big, swift, thumbs down.
John Wood wants to say something.
Yes. So I brought up the Holocaust because my father testified in the Belsen trials, and the evidence he gave, I actually think, was quite influential in the decision of having quite a few of the Nazis hanged, because which they weren't using to feed all these starving people, and he found the food in their barracks.
Yeah.
Dirk mentioned, but that's an exception. But then, where do you draw the line? If a person kills 14 people, no capital punishment. 100 people, 1,000 people. How many thousands before then it's okay for the state to kill them?
No, the Holocaust was a state.
Never okay.
The Holocaust is state-sponsored genocide. That's where I say you can't compare a mass global shooting with a state-sponsored genocide. That's why I said that's why it's different.
I see. But Mary, do you think those people, the Nazis that Dad testified against, should have been executed?
No, I'm with Dirk. I have to say I'm with Dirk, and the Rwandan genocide and everything like that. People who were, governments who were, who sanctioned the death of entire groups of people.
So if a person kills more than 14 people.
Because in some cases, Pat, as John quite rightly said, there's extenuating circumstances. I can't believe that somebody would just get up in the morning.
Adolf Hitler, they said, was a madman. He was responsible.
I can't believe that somebody would get up in the morning, go into a school and kill 14 children, unless there was something seriously awry.
That's true, yeah.
No, it's not making an excuse, Pat. He could be evil. He could be a monster. He could be absolutely pathological criminal.
You kind of have to look. You have to look at the.
But I don't want to decide whether someone dies or not.
I mean, carried in 4 full loaded weapons. He had all
but the point I was making, Pat, death penalty is not deterrent. So if you have to look at, for instance, US, you have to look at the whole society. The most mass shootings happen there. But was it 36,000 a year or something got killed due to mass shootings? That's what you should be looking at. That,
yeah.
There's a cultural thing there, and I don't know what it is. I don't think it's only guns. I think it's just whatever it is. That's what they.
We won't name it, but you're right, Dirk. I think it's all the processed food they're taking in as well.
Pat, I interviewed Mariam Ibrahim, and you know Mariam Ibrahim was on death row in Somalia, because her father was, she and her baby, she was pregnant on her second baby, her first baby was with her. She was shackled for her entire pregnancy in a Somalian prison because she was reared by her Christian mother when her Muslim father abandoned her at 3. But under the law, she was always considered Muslim. And because she adopted Catholicism and became a Catholic, she was sentenced to death because she wouldn't. Now, had they carried out that, had the American government, the Canadians, and the Vatican not intervened and not been in a position to intervene, Mariam Ibrahim and her baby would have died. They would have waited. They were going to wait until her baby was born, and then they would have instantly hanged her, and the baby would have been brought up Muslim. But the Vatican and the American government and that got her out. But had the death penalty been there, Mariam Ibrahim wouldn't be allowed alive today to have sat down and talked to me about her experiences.
We weren't looking for unanimity by any manner of means because the subject matter was too serious for that.
Yeah.
Well, we did. We got all but you.
All we can do is amplify the.
There's one more thing I want to say about this, and Barry's going to disagree with me. The bigger point.
Never, Dirk. I never disagree.
No, you will.
With you.
I'm pretty sure you will. The biggest punishment them would be leave him, put him in a cell, and play Jedward songs all day long.
I love Jedward.
That is worse than death. It must be. I mean, that was.
Yeah, Elton John songs, yeah.
Oh,
Let me say something as well.
Yes, John Wood.
Something, Dirk, the last thing, Dirk, you said about the school shootings.
Yeah.
And we also mentioned about labels.
Yeah.
And when I really disagree with mental health labels taking the responsibility away from somebody that's committed murder. Oh, it wasn't my fault, it's my label. I didn't do it, my label did it, and I can now get out of it. And I think that's a corruption of the legal system. Yeah. On the other hand, when people are, I've seen documentaries about what antidepressants can do to people. And I've seen testimony and so on the films where they're perfectly normal. They take these antidepressants and they turn into zombies, and they hear voices in their head telling them to get guns and kill people. And that sometimes affects people in that way. And that's a different scenario.
But not all. Some are just evil. But it still comes
and
down
that.
to the fact that I don't want to be, unless of course it's somebody in the government who had actually sentenced or actually been responsible for something like Srebrenica or the Holocaust, certainly the Holocaust and Rwanda and all of that. Yes, that I might be forced to change my mind.
Where do you draw the
on
line
that.
now? That's the question.
I draw the line on genocide, government sanctioned genocide.
That's interesting. We can, I think there's a program there, or certainly a chat there for antidepressants and the whole thing about antidepressants and the chemical companies later on. And anybody promoting these vaccines, I'm not talking about now or anything, should wear, you know, these Formula One drivers, when they come out of the jackets with all the labels of the companies. Any doctor that's getting paid by Pfizer and them or Johnson & Johnson should be wearing those overcoats when they're going on television on a discussion, I think. Anyway,
Yes.
the panel is the program on LiR Media.tv. That's another subject for the next night. We're just going to go around the panel, lads, because I know your time is precious as well as our own, and thank you for taking the time out. Global warming is an issue. I don't have to tell anybody on the panel about global warming because it's consistently and persistently on our program. And I hasten to say that I'm as confused as I was now, all the way back to the Rio conference, John Wood. That was a way back when, I forget, a friend of mine actually was on one of the NGOs that attended that Earth conference in Rio de Janeiro. I don't know, was it 12, 15 years ago, something like that, John?
Well, I'm not sure. I remember first seeing a Horizon program about it in the late 70s and being very inspired to be green and do something about it. But now I'm not so sure. And I think it's a huge bandwagon. It's wonderful to clean up pollution, but the whole CO2 model causing global warming, I don't personally believe anymore. I saw a documentary about it recently saying the CO2 causes the rise in heat. And actually, someone was arguing it's the other way around. There's another reason that the world is heating up, and that causes more CO2 to be released out of the oceans. So which is cause and which is effect? Isn't that interesting?
And Sídhe Ó'Donnabháin, are you a global warmist? You have visited a lot of countries yourself now. And
no, I say something very controversial here.
Never, Sídhe.
Oh no.
I don't buy the whole thing. Their choice of climate scientists is always, as usual, confined to what agenda they wish to push. It's all about raising, more taxes, and climate has been changing forever. They used to grow. We used to have vineyards in the monasteries in Ireland, in the 7th, 8th, 9th centuries. So, bit of heat, I don't know. Yes.
Can I come in after Sídhe?
Go on, Sídhe.
Yeah.
Go on, Sídhe.
So I'm very skeptical about it now. I don't even have much time for Greta Thunberg. I find her extremely annoying. I don't really understand how she's allowed to go to UN meetings. She's not a scientist. She actually really annoys me. That's extremely controversial. Probably be shot for saying that. The PC people, PC police. I haven't honestly looked into it and researched it enough. But it just bugs me at this point, to be honest. Just nothing to be annoyed about.
And Mary, are you feeling the heat in Limerick over this global warming?
I don't understand it, because when I was younger, and especially when I lived in England, the weather was just always lovely. I can always remember in England we were out having picnics. It seemed like every day of the week. Maybe that's a childhood memory that isn't based in any fact, but. Even here in Ireland, the long walks out Classy and everything like that, with my friend Anne and her father and things like that. But if you go out the Burren and you look at the Burren, and you'll see tropical flowers growing side by side with Arctic flowers. And if you go to Allowee Caves and you go into Allowee Caves, you've got the stalagmites and the stalactites that take something like 100 years to grow an inch, and they're actually meeting each other from the top to the bottom, the stalagmites and stalactites. evidence you can see in the flowers that are growing side by side. You have Arctic flowers growing side by side with tropical flowers. That phenomenon is known in no other place on Earth. It shows evidence that Ireland, which is thousands of years old, had a tropical climate at one stage, and then we went through an Arctic climate. We are, after all, around a globe. We are, after all, circular. The globe is so, and it rotates very slightly all the time. So eventually, countries that are nearest the equator will be nearest the colder climates. And in my view, and Greta Thunberg annoys me as well. I admire the fact that she's focused on something that's and it's positive, and it's nice to see a young person have passion for something. I just worry that she's being used by those in the who have a lot of money and a lot of vested interest in pushing a young child. Well, she's 18 now, but since she was a young child, I think a young vulnerable child in many respects, and pushing her for their agenda. And I worry about that. And it aggravates me that a child has been brought into the UN and into places to talk about something that really she shouldn't have on her mind at such a young age.
John Lonergan, are you feeling the heat down there in Cork with this global warming?
You have a tropical climate down there, don't you, John?
We have, yeah. No, I tell you, my whole thing is I don't believe it as well, right? I believe that, again, something like Mary's synopsis there, where the Earth is rotating, and, you know, I remember summers when they were really brilliant. The summer was the summertime, the winter was the winter time, autumn was autumn, and so forth. And it goes around in cycles, right? I have a major problem with all these people are saying that the climate is deteriorating because we're cutting down trees, and we're, as I said last week, the cows are farting, and all these things are causing the ozone layer to go, right? Yes, we're in the middle of a world a pandemic, and we were told to use paper towels to dry our hands. We were told to dump them. We were told the very same with plastic gloves. And yet I didn't hear anybody coming out and saying, 1 second, where's all this plastic gloves going? Where's all this paper going?
Where's the hazmat bins?
You know, like, my point is, the whole world went to this wearing gloves, drying your hands with paper towels, don't use cloth towels. Everyone dumped them. The toilet rolls were gone off the shelves, so were the kitchen rolls. And yet to get all that stuff, they have to cut down trees. There was nobody. I didn't hear any world leaders or anybody crying, oh, stop, we can't. You know, like, that's where I have a problem with it. And when it suits them.
What about you, Dirk?
You give Dirk the last word.
I have to disagree with Mary.
I knew he would.
Clearly,
he had that disagree with Mary look on his face.
But clearly, Mary, the Earth is flat. If not, we would all fall down, wouldn't we?
It's gravity, Dirk. Gravity.
I can see John's point, but I don't completely agree with this whole paper thing. But I was never told to dry hands with paper things and cloth. That's something media-driven. To be fair,
that's my point, Dirk.
I didn't hear that from any government official. That was purely media-driven, and that's another thing. But we can talk about it on critical thinking. People don't do that anymore. But in relation to the climate change. Before the show, I was telling Pat, I worked for a renewable energy company a couple of years ago, 2007, just before the financial crash hit in. And it was about the same time as the Green Party came into power together with Fianna Fáil in Ireland. And the first thing they did, the Green Party did this, and I never forget it, because it resulted in my company closing down, the one I was working for, was cutting all the grants for renewable energy products for geothermal for solar panels, you name it, cut in half. And I thought, well, because when we heard of the Green Party as a power, we thought it's great. This is going to boom our business now. But they cut everything. They cut all those things that's good for the environment in half.
Yeah.
But 80% of all the companies in renewable energy went bust just shortly after that. Now, but climate change is a fact. Let's not lie about it. Climate change is a fact. But the climate keeps changing all the time. 20,000 years ago, we had an ice age. When the dinosaurs roamed the earth, there was North Pole and South Pole, but there was no ice on it. So I mean, and I do believe, as human beings, we have a part to play in it as well. But it's overhyped. The consequences by human beings. Also, what a lot of people forget to mention, for the last 20, 30 years, there has been increase of sun flares. Okay, you know, the big yellow thing in the sky, which has a direct impact on the Irish, on Earth climate as well. No one mentions that. I do believe, though, we have to stop pollution in any way we can, because that's just ridiculous. There's no need for it, regardless if you believe in climate change or not. There's no need for it. As for our little Swedish friend, Miss Greta, I think Pat and Mary know what I think of her. I feel very sorry for her, and I feel very sorry for her and for her millionaire father and mother, who had to pay all the flights for her to go to UN. And it's awful to see that.
On those private planes.
On those private planes. Now,
climate change.
No, she did take a model. Yeah, she did take a boat trip once. I mean, hey, great. But
you know, spitting image puppet.
No, I don't want to see that. But there's one more thing I want to say about this, and I've seen it on Google as well now. Every time when you don't sign into your Google account, you have to click agree, and when you click the wrong thing, you get this whole spiel about carbon neutrality. That's the aim. Well, I want to have a zero carbon environment society.
John Wood.
That's great, but people forget one thing: we're all made of carbon. There's all carbon in us.
But Dirk, how are we going to make a difference if China doesn't make a difference, or India, or places like that? You know, I mean, it seems like a fruitless effort. Little old Ireland with 4.5 or 5 million people, all minded, eating vegetables like John Wood, and eating vegetables and
hang on a second,
China.
No,
but sorry, can I finish my thing?
Yes, finish your point, Dirk.
Policies, John.
Yeah, Pat, Dirk is finishing.
It was on our peat burning station, right? For the good of the green energy in Ireland. We closed down our producing peat briquettes in Ireland. Now we're importing thousands and thousands of tons of peat briquettes from where? From Germany.
Lithuania.
No, Lithuania.
Lithuania.
Get your facts straight, Pat.
Yeah, Lithuania. It's a different country, Pat.
That's one of our policies.
The point I was making, I want to finish on this, because the buzzword now is also carbon neutrality. You can't. We're all human beings. That means everyone needs to be killed off the planet. The planet needs to be a big a rock. That's what it is. On top of that, we all talk about electric cars and our smartphones. All of these activists, they use the smartphones. Now, in the smartphone, there's a battery. The battery, lithium, and it's made of lots of minerals which have to be dug up and mined. So we see at the moment now we have a shortage of electricity because everyone has used these devices which have to be charged about 5 times a day. People have electric cars.
Dirk, with the way I run out of petrol, if I had an electric car, it'd never move. I'm always running out because I hate going in and filling up.
If you're flying down the M4 and your electric car stops in the middle of the night, at least if you had petrol or diesel, you could get the old can and bring out your drop of diesel and throw it into your car. What do you do when your electric car runs down? Bang.
Well,
Now,
we're being told there's going to be shortages because of this data center and everything like that. Well, they're not saying that, but that's actually why.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, and then Eamon Ryan is telling us to get electric cars. Like, why would we get electric cars when there isn't even enough power, possibly for this winter?
But sure, look
I
at
think-
the
I
price
think
of
that-
diesel and petrol at the moment, guys.
John
Look at the price
Lonergan-
of it. It went up. It went up way before the budget. It went up after the budget.
Yeah.
And yet you have Eamon Ryan coming on and the government saying we're going to run out of electricity, but we want you all to go on cars. And the reason we're putting up the price of diesel and petrol is so that you go to electric.
It's
What?
just like
I mean,
defense,
they're
like
the
everything else.
they're the most inept crowd I have ever
The Green Party
seen.
are just slime. They're just
Don,
all
why don't you say it as you really feel?
Oh, Mary, I couldn't. I come there blue.
the language the words would be too big from this
Go
edition.
on. Go for it.
Go
That's a
for
grand
it,
John.
finale. A grand finale. Have a rant.
We
No,
want to
I
thank
couldn't.
everybody. We want to thank everybody for appearing on the show, lads, on this Saturday night. It's
John will
fantastic.
get you into trouble.
Yeah.
From John Wood in Sussex, from Mary Honan,
Bye.
from Sídhe Ó'Donnabháin, from Dirk to Klein, and from John Lonergan. Thanks, lads, very much. And
before we go, Pat, do you still have my bank account number to transfer the fee for tonight, or do I get a check again?
I think he lost it.
Well, you can't send me a check. It's fine. I'll cash himself. No problem. But regular fee though.
That's if you can find a bank that's open there.
Well, that's true.
Thanks very much, lads. Till we meet again. Good evening and take care.
Nice to meet you, Joe.
Yeah.
Bye.
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 This is LiR Media. To whom it concerns, welcome to the panel.